Dari and Mel, ESPN Radio, ESPNRadio.com. Coming up this hour, we talked about Kuiper's collars at 10:30 Eastern Time. There is a chance, you got to bear with us here, there is a chance it's going to be at 10:15 Eastern Time. So we'll let you know officially at the end of the segment here, but I think that's the plan. We're leaning towards that being the plan. Stephen A. Smith may move to 10:30 Eastern Time. Jason Kendall, long-time catcher in the bigs. He's got a book coming out, Throwback. A big league catcher tells how the game is really played. He's got that coming out. He's going to join us coming up in just a little bit, coming up, I guess, about 45 minutes from now. Jason Kendall. But right now, all leading up to the NFL draft, Mel, you, of course, did your big board, certain positions, but now you're going from the oblong-shaped ball to the round one. It's the big board of NBA prospects. Here we go.
Mel's Big Board. Getting you ready for the NFL draft the only way Kuiper can. Number 5.
Number 5 for me, and I'm going to go with all the guys I've seen. Fran Fraschilla, he's a genius when it comes to the players from overseas and abroad and all that. I can't go with them. I haven't seen enough of them. So I'm going to go with Julius Randle from Kentucky at number 5. Saw a lot of Julius Randle. He has that NBA body. He's the power forward. He draws comparisons to Zach Randolph, and I like the way Zach Randolph plays. Wish he was a little bit better shooter from the outside, but I'll go here at number 5 with Julius Randle from Kentucky.
Number 4.
A kid out of Indiana, Noah Vonleh. And I look at this kid, he can shoot. The much better outside shooter than Randall. That's why I gave him an edge at 4 and didn't put him at 5. And here's a guy you look at, and when you put the ball in a basket the way he can, and you have versatility, Vonleh's a guy I will put slightly ahead of Randall, just because of the ability to shoot the basketball more consistently from the outside.
Number 3.
Tough call here because you're splitting hairs. I'm going to go at 3 with Andrew Wiggins from Kansas. I thought he'd be number 1. Love the way his talent can translate to the NBA. But he was hyped to be this all-world player, and I didn't see it. Did he show signs of becoming that type of player late in the year? Yes, he did, but it wasn't there from start to finish. Maybe once he got it, it's going to continue, and he's going to roll. I thought I'd have him at 1. I'll put him at 3, but he certainly could be 1 in another year or two when we're talking about how you have the best players in this draft turned out to be.
Let me jump in here real quick before number 2, Mel. That Andrew Wiggins is who Chad Ford of ESPN.com actually has going number 1. To the Cavaliers, for what it's worth. He didn't necessarily think that would be the best fit, but sources are telling him that Wiggins would be his number 1.
Got a ton of talent, and if he could build on the way he played, late in the season, then maybe. And of course, he was hyped to be all-world coming in. Maybe I'm underselling it, but I'll put him at 3.
Number 2.
Joel Embiid, Kansas. You think about the big guy, and there are not many quality centers being produced at the college level for the NBA. It just aren't that many. When you get somebody like Embiid, you got to give him a shot. I know the back injury, that has to be thoroughly checked out and all that, but he has the natural talent. The improvement he's shown over the last year gives you reason to believe he can have a big-time future in the NBA. So I'll go Joel Embiid out of Kansas at number 2.
Number 1.
I'm going to go with the Duke Blue Devil, Jabari Parker. Loved everything about him coming out of high school. He's more than ready to come into the league and make a major contribution right away. I think he's more prepared to do that than Wiggins is. Gifted offensive player. I'm predicting he could be Rookie of the Year. Maybe he's not as physically gifted or as supremely talented as Wiggins, but right now I think he's the better player, and I think he'll have a better rookie season in the NBA than Wiggins. That's why I went with Jabari Parker from Duke as my number 1 player for the NBA draft.
There it is. That is Mel's big board of NBA draft hopefuls. Mel, I actually really like your number 1. I would go Parker number 1 as well because he's so versatile. He can score he can shoot the 3. He can get to the basket against bigger guys, against quicker guys. He's incredibly mature for somebody who played 1 season in college. He's very intelligent as well. He's a great leader. He's a good guy. I think Jabari Parker is the guy, too. It's funny because we talk about all these guys. There's an element of risk to a lot of them. I don't think Parker necessarily has it. Embiid with the back injury. obviously suffered late in the season. Wiggins with the up-and-down ride that he had at Kansas, and you're really living off of potential there with him. Randall, I think, is okay, but I would honestly put Randall – I think Randall's a little bit more of kind of a poor man's Jabari Parker. I don't even think it's close there when you want to if you're going to take one or the other there, and he doesn't have the versatility that Parker has. So I'm with you on Parker. I really like Jabari Parker.
Yeah, I mean, Wiggins has a chance to be great. There's no question about it, Dory. I just went with what I saw from the start to the finish, and Embiid is the big man, and then you have Vonleh and Randall. So I just went with Vonleh because I think he is a better outside shooter right now than Randall is. But Randall's a Zach Randolph type, and we'll see what he can do. All five of those guys, you think there's a bust in that group?
Ooh, boy, that I would just flat out come out and call a bust.
Bust potential. Who would have the biggest bust potential of that group?
You know, here's the deal. Everybody's celebrating that Cleveland got, in Cleveland is celebrating that they got the first pick for the third time in 4 years. They hit a home run with Kyrie Irving, right? I mean, that's a stud. He's an all-star. He's phenomenal. They busted with Anthony Bennett last year. They really screwed up that pick. He spent more time in the D-League than he did in the NBA. There's a lot of pressure on them here, and I think if you take Wiggins, and I'm not calling him a bust, but if you take a guy, and let's face it, except for maybe 3 or 4 games last year, he did not live up to the hype that he came into Kansas with. You're taking a little bit of a risk here. Because if you have 3 number 1 picks in 4 years, you better not screw 2 of them up. You really better not. So I think that Wiggins is a risk at 1. Like, if I'm Cleveland, I'm taking Jabari Parker. There's no question I'm taking Jabari Parker, who's, more of a 3 probably. He's got all kinds of versatility. That's the guy I'm taking if I'm them. I just feel like there's less risk with him. You just got to be really careful if you're Cleveland.
And an interesting guy, Dory, I almost went with just to go. But when you consider the fact that he shot 29% last year, 29.9 this year, behind the college three-point line, that's not a lot of improvement. I think people talk about it as improvement from an outside shooting perspective. It wasn't significant, 29% to 29.9 from outside the three-point line in college. But Marcus Smart, would you think about him? I mean, I thought about putting him in at 5, bumped him to 6. Some have him down a little bit further than that. It's going to be interesting to see where he comes off the board.
He's just, he did some really dumb things for what I consider as a really smart guy, right? I mean, Marcus Smart is a very intelligent young man that flew off the handle a couple of times. We'll remember the push of the fan at Texas Tech, whatever it is, but the slamming the chairs, sitting away from the team in a huddle, just dumb things that he's just too smart to do. There's an element of risk there. But, I mean, you talk about players. He's a stud player. He doesn't shoot well from outside, but look, if he's a point guard, you're going to use him as a distributor who can get to the basket, not a guy you want to pull up and shoot from 3. I think he's fine. I do. I think he's fine. Let's look at winners here in this draft. I mean, Cleveland, again, an opportunity here. You don't want to fall on your face again, second straight year, but a great opportunity for them. A poor Utah to fall back to number 5. That's a team that Chad Ford says would have loved to have had Jabari Parker, and they're not going to have a shot at him at that point. How about a winner? How about Charlotte? Here where I am, they're the Hornets officially as of Tuesday again. They've got number 24. That's the pick they had slotted. But because of a prior trade with the Pistons, if Detroit got a top 8 pick in the lottery, Detroit would have kept that pick. They got 9, which means Charlotte now has 9 and 24 for a team that made the playoffs. They were 4 games above 500. And if you look at a Doug McDermott, who Chad Ford has going at 9, what they need is a shooter, a guy who could score from the 2 spot or the 3. McDermott's more of a 3. Okay, I can see that. You get MKG off the floor because he has no offensive ability, though he's a good defensive player. But how about that? Lance Stevenson? That's a guy they could end up with, too. There's a lot of talk about Lance Stevenson here. He's a free agent. Imagine Kemba Walker, Lance Stevenson, Al Jefferson. Kind of like that.
You would like that. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, enough Charlotte talk. Dorian Mel, brought to you by Ace, the helpful place. So here we go. Now we are going to tell you what's next. We talked about it 10 minutes ago. Is it Kuiper's Callers? Is it Stephen A? It is time for you to get on the phone. Kuiper's Callers straight ahead. Your football question for Mel, round 2 of 3. And then we're done with Kuiper's Callers for the year, folks. 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. You and Mel, straight ahead, ESPN Radio.
Got a question for Mel or just want to give him a piece of your mind?
Trying to get to the point. There's a lot going on. Bartavius Mingo. Don't even have anything to say about him. Just like the name.
888-SAY-ESPN.
Quarterback position.
You can be one of Kuiper's Callers.
All right, there it is. You heard the number. Let's go. 888-SAY-ESPN, round 2 of the day. Kuiper's Callers, starring Mel, ESPN Radio. Let's go to KC in Minnesota. You're on ESPN Radio.
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my call. Minneapolis was awarded the 2018 Super Bowl, and Mel, I'd like you to put on your psychic hat. I feel like we have a young, talented team that's improving. What do you think our chances are of being a player in our own Super Bowl?
That's a great question. You get a couple years away. If Bridgewater is the right man for the job, you're still in a division with Aaron Rodgers and Cutler and Stafford. So I would say it's going to be tough. Anthony Barr is a key guy because you got to get after those quarterbacks. And Anthony Barr didn't really look as good on tape as the numbers look like on the stat sheet. So we'll see. Bridgewater and Barr are going to determine whether that's the case or not. And I'll tell you right now, I would probably bet against it.
Nobody's ever played in a Super Bowl in their own stadium. We know that. Josh in Arkansas, you're on ESPN Radio. Good morning.
Appreciate the call, fellas. With the addition of Champ Bailey and Jarius Byrd and kid from the CFL and drafting John Baptiste, do the Saints add enough on defense to actually be legitimate contenders this year?
I think they could be right back in it. I think the defense, Gene Baptiste isn't going to be a physical guy in terms of run support and tackling, but he's got a lot of ability and coverage with his length, a former wide receiver. I think when you look at this draft, there's not a lot of help you're going to get. Brandon Cooks on the offensive side, Gene Baptiste on the defensive side. Not much else. So what you did in free agency is going to have to be key here. But I do think they can jump back into it. They are a good football team, and they have a good coaching staff, and they got a heck of a quarterback. So, yeah, I think the Saints will be a playoff team.
All right, let's go to Kelly in Ithaca, New York. Hey, Kelly.
Hi, guys. Thanks for taking my call. Now, my question is, as a Cornell alumnus, what are the chances that Jeff Matthews sticks with the Falcons? Thanks.
It's real good. I think Jeff Matthews should have been drafted in the 5th or 6th round. I think he's a guy that certainly has an opportunity, in Atlanta. You think about, Scott Pioli with Atlanta. Scott Pioli was in New England with Tom Brady. And Tom Brady and Jeff Matthews, I'm not going to say they're similar, but Jeff Matthews is a quarterback who's not going to be real athletic in the pocket, not move around, but he can manage the pocket very effectively. He's got a real good throwing motion, delivery, and accuracy. I think Matthews is going to be a nice quarterback for them down the road. Probably in a backup role, obviously, but he'll make that football team.
How about Keith in Atlanta? You're on ESPN Radio. Hey, Keith. Oh, no Keith. Let's go Melvin in Tennessee. Hey, Melvin.
Yeah, how you guys doing today?
Good. Look what you got.
Hey, man, I want to ask you a question. All your years been in the NFL, have you ever seen a quarterback that has won without an offense? That when his running game is at the bottom of the NFL and his defense is at the bottom of the NFL, the reason why I asked that because I looked up Tony Romo years since he's been a starter, and they only had 1,000 yards rushing 1 year. That was last year. They still was 24, and he only had 1 year with the defense with the top 15. So you think it's more quarterback or the owner?
Yeah, I think Tony Romo and Tom Brady have carried football teams as far as they could possibly go. I think criticism of Romo is unfair. Granted, he's had some bad throws and some bad moments in some key games, but he got them as far as anybody could have expected, beyond what could have been expected. Brady carried that team this past year. He's carried that team a number of years. So I think Brady and Romo, certainly Romo is never going to be Tom Brady, but I think for what they've meant to their organizations, they're very similar.
How about Ken in North Carolina? Good morning, Ken.
Let's start with the NFL can move the draft wherever they want to, but they cannot take it away from Kuiper and ESPN.
Well, we're going to be on. I do say this, Ken. We're going to be on the road somewhere. I don't know if it's going to be Chicago, Dallas, or wherever, but we're not going to be probably in New York, which was an easy trek from Baltimore and Connecticut. So we're going to be traveling somewhere to the NFL draft, and cities are going to be obviously bidding for the draft, and it's opening up. It was a huge rating this year, an incredible rating. Everybody was watching, and because of that, we're going to be a traveling show come draft time.
Watched it all the way to round 7, Mel.
Appreciate it, man. Appreciate it, Ken.
Let's tell Cleveland how the big miss that they had with Mike Campanaro from Wake Forest, which Dory's probably a little familiar with this kid. He's a Wes Welker type. Mm-hmm. And Cleveland gives him away, and they need receivers. Congrats, Mel. Your Ravens got another one.
Well, Ravens got a kid out of River Hill High School right here, so they knew him very well. And he went to Wake Forest, and he was a record setter. So you're right. The Amendola-Welker comparisons are accurate. Michael Campanaro will help this Raven offense. And why Cleveland didn't see a reason to draft a receiver, I have no idea.
One of the most underappreciated guys in college football, Mel, I think over the last couple of years. He was everything to Wake Forest. You hear that all the time. He means everything to that team. He meant everything to them. And when he got hurt, they had no shot. Mm-hmm. All right, Mike in Missouri. Good morning, Mike. You're on ESPN Radio.
Yeah, how you doing, Mel?
Good, Mike.
Just wanted to ask you. I wanted to ask you something about James Franklin, the quarterback from Missouri, ex-quarterback from Missouri. What was your ups and downs on him, and how do you have him rated? And do you think he'll have very much of a chance of making that team there in Detroit? Thanks.
Well, he had his moments, obviously, and, of course, the injury when it looked like they were going to be rolling, and Matty Mock came in and did a pretty decent job. But he is in Detroit. Obviously, the same thing we're talking about with Matthews in Atlanta. You got a great starting quarterback there, and Matthews, I shouldn't say great, a very good. You're not be great until you win a playoff game. But Matthew Stafford's got big-time talent, and they're set there. But can Franklin find a way to stick on an NFL roster, even if it's not Detroit? I think he possibly can, as several of those players. I mean, they had a couple undrafted guys that had an opportunity maybe to fall into the 7th round. Cornelius Lucas, a tackle out of Kansas State, would be front and center. I thought he had a chance to be drafted. He went undrafted, and they signed him.
Let's go to Indiana now. Chris, good morning.
Good morning. Question for Mel. Who do you think the biggest free agent bust will be? In my opinion, would be it's probably going to be Deshaun Jackson, that knucklehead that left to go to Washington. I think he's just solely focused on beating the Eagles and showing them up in their own division. Appreciate it.
Well, I'll say this. It's going to be tremendously interesting to see how this all plays out because you impacted two teams in the same division. And I don't know if the Eagles, when they made that move, thought he would be a Redskin or hoped he'd be a Redskin. That's kind of a nightmare to have a player go there to be motivated with a chip on his shoulder. So I don't know about being a disappointment. I think the big key is going to be RG3 staying healthy, and the right tackle spot's the key. I don't think Jackson's going to be himself a disappointment. If his numbers aren't where they were in Philadelphia, it's going to be because RG3 was impacted by an offensive line. It didn't get better.
It's going to be tight, but I'm going to get him in because he wants to talk Panthers. Brad in Charleston, you're on ESPN Radio.
Hey, thanks for taking my call, guys. I want to talk about Panther football. Do you think that Benjamin's going to be the number one wide receiver, and do you think that Cam's going to have the weapons to take us to the next level this year?
Well, Benjamin, how quickly he develops as a pro is going to be key. He had that 1 year where he was more consistent, but, Corey Brown comes in, Marcus Lucas comes in out of Missouri, but a lot's going to be expected. He was the only receiver drafted. And this is a team that didn't get the offensive tackle to help out with Jordan Gross gone. So whether Carolina made enough improvement via the draft, very debatable.
There you go. Surprise someone special with a gift just because from 1-800-Flowers.com. Go to 1-800-Flowers.com/ESPN for exclusive offers. You have another question for Mel, tweet us at ESPN Radio or at Darian Mel. We'll get that answered during the break. Straight ahead, Stephen A. Smith on the Pacers Heat Game 3, on the Spurs Thunder Game 3. How can Oklahoma City even survive to get to a Game 7, perhaps? Stephen A. Smith coming up, ESPN Radio. That beats pleasure. Well done, Mikey C. That's how Mikey C about Muse. Get a little rock and roll into the show. A little panic station. Not that we panic by any stretch of the imagination. Darian Mel, ESPN Radio, ESPNRadio.com. Game 3, Eastern Conference Finals from Miami is tonight, 7:30. Coverage begins at 7:30 Eastern Time on ESPN Radio, ESPN Television. You can see it as well. And Stephen A. Smith will be there, and then he goes to my home state of Oklahoma for Game 3 of that series on Sunday. So Stephen A., busy man, joining us right now via the Subway Fresh Take Hotline. Let's talk first about the series that you will see tonight in Miami. What do you expect? And I know you're not a doctor, but what do you expect from Paul George coming off of a concussion, and what does he have to give for Indiana to have a shot tonight?
Guys, I think that, he'll be fine. Listen, this ain't football. You don't get knocked upside your head too often on a basketball court. So I'm not trying to diminish the impact of a concussion and how that can affect you. But as long as your head is not throbbing and you don't have, migraines or anything like that, you'll go out on the court and you'll perform. It still may not be good enough. As far as I'm concerned, I don't expect it to tonight. I don't care if Paul George was 100%. I still expect them to lose to Miami in Game 3. But at the same time, his importance is immeasurable. When you consider how successful the Indiana Pacers are on the court with him, outscoring teams by about 5 points, but getting outscored by about 18 when he's off the court. There's no question that he's pivotal to their proficiency and effectiveness, particularly on the offensive end of the floor. Now, defensively, he's formidable because he's always sticking the opposing team's best player unless it's a big center. He's usually the guy guarding them, and he's been guarding LeBron James, and some would argue that he had some success in Game 2. But I think LeBron James just looked fatigued. He's been asked to carry an incredibly heavy load throughout the season, especially with Dwayne Wade having missed 28 games this year. As they monitored him and geared him for the postseason. But still in all, when you look at a guy like Paul George, he's needed on the offensive end of the floor as well. But that's more so because of the deficiencies existing with Indiana in terms of their sporadic play from Roy Hibbert, along with George Hill and Lance Stevenson. Lance Stevenson has played exceptionally well in the first 2 games of this series, but it's been sporadic in terms of his overall playoff performance. The same could be said for George Hill. The same could definitely be said for Roy Hibbert. So when you've got those kind of problems and you don't seem to have a bench that you can trust in Frank Vogel, but so much, that makes Paul George's role that much more pivotal. But again, even if he were 100%, I don't see them beating Miami in Game 3.
Stephen A., I normally would ask you about Serge Ibaka, but we talked off the air, and I can pass along to our listeners. Stephen A. gives them about a .005 chance of beating the Spurs even with Ibaka. So it's all San Antonio all the time. I want to jump to a team that's kind of like the Washington Redskins. They kind of win the offseason. This is the 3rd time in 4 years the Cleveland Cavaliers have had the number 1 pick.
Yep.
2 questions, Stephen A. It's all this talk about LeBron maybe opting to go back to Cleveland. What do you think the chances that he leaves Miami are? And if you were the Cleveland Cavaliers general manager, what would you do with the number 1 overall pick?
Well, first of all, let me answer the second question first. Whatever the Cleveland Cavaliers do, they better do well with it. A GM was fired. A coach is ultimately gone because Anthony Bennett may go down as the biggest number 1 overall pick bust in NBA history. I mean, this dude, you almost forgot he was on the roster, guys. I mean, just a complete, absolute no-show. And at times, for the first part of the season anyway, literally looked like he didn't know how to play the game of basketball. And obviously, Mike Brown and those boys wanted to grab him with the number 1 overall pick, and that is why at this particular moment in time they are unemployed. But you look at Anthony Bennett, he did come on late, he did improve, and you got to hope so, but still in all, it was a bust thus far. This particular draft, they can't go wrong because whether it's Embiid out of Kansas, Wiggins out of Kansas, or Jabari Parker out of Duke, one of those dudes are going number 1 overall. And if you pick any of those guys, nobody's going to fault you for that. To answer the second question, the first question actually, LeBron James, I would say there's a 40% chance he would leave Miami. You want to give Miami the edge better than a 50-50 shot because Pat Riley is there. They're a championship organization, they're a championship team. They're first class all the way. And if you're LeBron James and you're thinking about your future, the one thing that you have to take into consideration is that Pat Riley has not broken a promise to you yet. What he has told you he would do, he has done. And as a result of that, you have to give credit where credit is due and have an innate belief in this organization. So that gives Miami the edge. But the roster is LeBron James' number 1 priority. What he has gone through this year, guys, he's been tired. He's been taxed. He's been asked to do more than he's ever been asked to do because Dwayne Wade hasn't been healthy for a third of the season. So because of it, you got to remember, he didn't come to Miami for this. He didn't come to Miami for part two of the Cleveland experience from years ago. And so now he's looking at the roster, not just now, but moving forward. And he's watching what teams do. In his perfect world, he'd have an opportunity to play with Carmelo Anthony. That's who he wants to play with. And Carmelo Anthony, like anybody else, would love to play with him as well. The problem is, who can make that happen? Miami would have to do a lot. They would have to hope that Chris Bosh opts out and leaves, that Dwayne Wade will be looking to take a pay cut, which Dwayne Wade is not inclined to do. So all of those things have an effect. But in the end, Miami deserves the edge, but understand the options that LeBron James has. He can opt out and choose to go elsewhere. He can opt out just so he can re-up with a long-term deal for Miami, or he can opt in, finish out his last year in Miami, and then be a part of the 2015 class. And who knows what possibilities lie ahead there. So he's got an abundance of options, and 29 other teams in the league would do anything they could to get their hands on him.
Stephen A. Smith joining us here. Dari Noka, Mel Kiper, Dari Mel, ESPN Radio. I think there is an assumption from people that are not as tied in as you are, Stephen A., that if LeBron leaves, then it's automatically Cleveland. He's going to. And you don't, I know that you don't feel that way. If he left, what's the likelihood that you would give it, percentage-wise or however you want to quantify it, that it's Cleveland he goes to?
If it were him leaving Miami, I would say Cleveland has a 75 to 80% chance.
Ooh, okay.
The thing that everybody knows is that one of the greatest stories that could ever be associated with LeBron James or any professional athlete is if he elected to go back home. To come back home a champion, you have to understand, with all the money that he's making, the superstar status that he enjoys, the cachet that comes with it, there's only one reason he would go home, and that's to bring a championship back to the city of Cleveland for the first time since 1964 in any sport, and for the first time ever in Cavaliers history. All would be forgiven, and the mission would be clear. I want LeBron James. I'm back here to help this city capture a championship. He'd be deified even more than he is already. And it would be one of the greatest stories in the history of sports if he were to elect to do that. But in order to accomplish that, again, you've got Kyrie Irving. You've got to utilize this number one overall pick. And more importantly, you've got to hire a coach that LeBron James believes in. You got to have a coach who's reputable, who has an incredible reputation and knows what he's doing. It can't be somebody who's suspect. It can't be somebody who's learning on the job and is going to be better 3 or 4 years down the road. No. It's got to be the right man. Because
who would that be, Stephen A?
It's hard to say right now. I would tell you a Jeff Van Gundy cannot be ignored. I definitely think somebody like that, applies. A George Karl can't be ignored considering their reputation. I know people want me to say Lionel Hollins and guys like that, but Lionel Hollins is a good coach that should still be the coach in Memphis as far as I'm concerned. Mm-hmm. And if Yeager leaves Memphis to go to Minnesota to take that job with his friend Flip Saunders, Memphis needs to go and bring Lionel Hollins back and apologize for letting him go in the first place. But Lionel Hollins is not Doc Rivers. And that's the difference. And so and he's not Phil Jackson. So if you're not Phil Jackson, you're not Doc Rivers. There are 3 coaches that come to my mind: Jeff Van Gundy, George Karl, or go back to college and grab Larry Brown to come back and be the coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers, even though I don't know if LeBron James would want to play for him, because Larry Brown can coach his butt off, especially on the defensive end of the floor. But offensively, he's not the most innovative guy in the world, even though I still consider him to be one of the greatest coaches I've ever seen.
Stephen A. Smith. Stephen A., always appreciate you stopping by the show. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, guys. Y'all take care.
Great stuff, pal. You got it, man.
He's going to be busy. Going to Miami today for the game tonight, Game 3, and then to Oklahoma City for Game 3 of that series tomorrow. And hopefully the Thunder decide to go ahead and join Stephen A. there inside the building and play some good basketball. Dari and Mel, ESPN Radio. Don't forget, though, after splitting those first 2 games in Indy, the series does go to Miami. Pacers Heat Game 3 coverage tonight, 7:30 Eastern, ESPN Radio. And, of course, you can watch the game on ESPN. Coming up, He played 15 years in Major League Baseball as a catcher. He's now written a book talking about how the game is really played. Jason Kendall going to join us. Dorian Mel, ESPN Radio. All right. Dorian Mel, ESPN Radio, ESPNRadio.com. Taking you to noon Eastern time. Coming up top of the hour here, 15 minutes, our hot list. Mel, where you and I, you answered a question about looking into your crystal ball. Mm-hmm. We both have to. What NBA superstars are most likely to play for a different team next season? We're going to go 3-2-1 on that. Coming up. That's top of the hour, 11 o'clock. Eastern time. It's to have any career in Major League Baseball. 3-4 years is obviously difficult to all of us who ever dreamed of that as kids. But to go for 15 seasons and to hit .288 doing it, playing behind the plate, that's a heck of an achievement, and that's what our next guest was able to do. Jason Kendall, former catcher, Pirates, A's, Brewers, Royals, Cubs. He joins us now, authored a new book, Throwback, A Big League Catcher Tells How the Game is Really Played. And, Jason, I think the as a catcher, the thought is you see and hear things more than any other position. What are the conversations like with the hitters? What are the conversations like with the umpires? What do you really tell the pitcher when you walk up to the mound after he throws a pitch that maybe you were crossed up on or when it's a crucial moment? I like the title of this book, How the Game is Really Played. How was the game really played? What are you getting at here?
Well, you know what? It's funny. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. But it's Lee Judge, the co-author. He is the first reporter that I've seen that actually, in my 15 years, is my last year playing with Kansas City, that got inside of heads and asked players questions on little things about the game. And I think what we tried to do with this whole book was, baseball can be boring if you don't really know what's going on, but there is a game within a game in every pitch. And I think that's what we kind of tried to do, was make it more enjoyable for whoever picks up the book and reads it, to whether you're watching it at home with your family or you go to the ballpark, just little things that makes the game more enjoyable, because it is the greatest game out there. And I think that's what we tried to do, and I think we kind of did it, as far as just little things that you can watch throughout the first pitch to the last that will make it more exciting for you.
As pivotal as a catcher is to the success of the guy throwing the ball, the pitcher, Jason, every pitcher talks about, I want my own catcher. I want him to be out there. I don't care what his batting average is. I want him out there. And you caught, and you were behind the plate with so many pitchers during your long career in Major League Baseball. Who was the single best pitcher you ever caught during your career?
Well, you put me on the spot. I caught a lot of great ones. I would say at one point, best stuff now, Rich Harden, when he was healthy with Oakland. That was best stuff-wise. Now, I couldn't sit here and pinpoint one, but best stuff-wise, Rich Harden. He had just an electric fastball. He called it a changeup. It was like a slider, a fork. It was best stuff at one point, Rich Harden. But man, I caught some good ones, and it was a pleasure catching them.
Former big league catcher Jason Kendall joining us here via the Subway Fresh Take Hotline. You look at the teams for which you played. Pirates, A's, Royals at the end of your career. Throw the Brewers in there as well. And they're all small market teams that face the challenge. You didn't play for a Yankees or a Red Sox or an Angels or a Dodgers or a Mets. You played for small market teams. Jason, did that get to how do you handle that when you're playing with teams that are economically at a disadvantage? I know it doesn't, we see the A's win and we see the Pirates win last year and so on and so forth. The Brewers are winning. But what is that like, being in that locker room when you know the disadvantages that you have economically?
You know what, and that's a good question, is if you look back at the Texas Rangers, and I can't really look, I think it was in the mid-'90s, they had all these superstars. I mean, Alex Rodriguez, Pudge, Palmeiro, you can go on and on.
Yeah.
And they're supposed to win everything, they're in last place. You can have all these superstars on one team, big market, low market. You have to gel with the 25 guys that are in the clubhouse. I know that my second year in the big leagues, we had a $9 million payroll with the Pittsburgh Pirates, and we went down. We were in a pennant race, and we had a $9 million payroll, And if we swept the Astros our last 3 games of the season, we would have a 1-game playoff. It is all about the chemistry in the clubhouse, and if everybody gets along, does what they're capable of doing, not trying to do too much, egos, throw them out the window, and you just do what you're capable of doing, and you go and win. So I think the chemistry in the clubhouse, small market, big market. No, don't get me wrong. If you got a guy that's making $20 million, there's a reason why he's making $20 million. He's probably going to hit 25 and drive in 100. But that chemistry is so important as well.
Jason, it's been debated, and I know there's some great managers always said, I'm only responsible for 2-3 wins a year. You had a long, illustrious career, and you dealt with different managers. First of all, who was the best manager you had the pleasure of playing for, and how much of a difference does a manager make over the course of the season, and how many games you actually win?
Oh, it makes a big. That's the captain. That's the one that has the respect from all those guys. I would say Gene Lamont. He was a player's manager. I had some good ones and I had some bad ones. Ned Yost was a good one. And if you look back at it, it's funny because everybody always asks me, what was your favorite years? And immediately I say Oakland and Milwaukee. Why? Because we went to the playoffs. And winning cures all, without a doubt. But you're winning. I went to the playoffs. It took me 11 years to go to the playoffs. And everything that you think it is, it's more. It's just exciting. But I had some good ones and some bad ones. Gene Lamont, off the top of my head, would be one of the was my.
Well, let me jump in here, Jason, for a minute. When you say the bad, you don't have to name names, but what would define a bad manager in your opinion?
Hey, someone that doesn't have control of the team. Because your players are what? As coaches, you can do as much as you can, but I've never had a hitting coach actually step in the box and hit for me. I've never had a manager catch a pitch. There's 2 things that are easy to do in this game. One is hustle, and the other one is be prepared. And as a manager, if you can get those guys to do that, the 25 guys in that locker room, and protect them, have their backs, whether it be a close call, whether it be right or wrong, protecting your players is a huge, huge thing. So I think that's probably the most important thing. And, you're the leader. Hey, someone's not running the ball out. Hey, get them out. It's one of the things that you can do with players today is take away the playing time. And hustle and being prepared are the biggest things out there. And you know what? If you're not hustling, there's always somebody else right behind you ready to take your job.
Former big league catcher Jason Kendall joining us. Quickly, Jason, in about 45 seconds, 30 to 45 seconds, the best, most random conversation you had during a game, whether it's with a hitter stepping into the box, an umpire, when you're standing on first with the opposing first baseman, just the most random conversation that you can share with us on national radio.
Okay, well, real quick. Okay, so you know what? Castillo, who is playing with the Giants now, is coming in to pitch his first big league. I'm with Oakland, first big league appearance. And go to the mound. Kurt Young comes out and says, "Hey, Chavi, Eric Chavez is playing third. Can you tell him to do a inside move before he throws his first pitch?" So Eric Chavez goes, "Hey, dude, do an inside move before you throw your first pitch." And Kurt Young says, "No." In Spanish. He goes, "What, just because I'm Mexican? I speak Spanish? I don't speak Spanish. I'm from San Diego, dude." and then you start getting the giggles. And so that was probably that was a tough question, but that's the first one off the top of my head.
I like it. Jason Kendall, author of the book Throwback, a big league catcher tells how the game is really played. It is out. You can get it now. Jason, great stuff, man. We appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
Guys, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Take care, Jason.
Right, there you go. I like it. This afternoon, catch one of baseball's top young pitchers in action as Milwaukee's Willie Peralta goes up against the Miami Marlins. Coverage begins 3 Eastern, ESPN Radio. And then Sunday night baseball tomorrow, Cardinals and Reds out of the NL Central. Straight ahead hot list. What 3 NBA stars do we think have the best shot of playing elsewhere next season? ESPN Radio.
Dari Noka and Mel Kiper Jr. on ESPN Radio.
And ESPNRadio.com.
Mel Kiper and Dari Noka, Mel loves her hair and Dari's from Oklahoma.
Dari and Mel, ESPN Radio, ESPNRadio.com. Final hour of the show today. And then Mel takes a lengthy vacation. Next week we've got Dan Dockich. Of course, he'll be doing it from Indiana, where not sure where the schedule would be, assuming the Eastern Conference Finals continues. But anyway, he's all over that. So that'll be certainly good. But Mel's vacation begins in 1 hour. Mel, bags are packed. You're ready to rock and roll, I would imagine.
Oh, no. I'm not going anywhere for a while, Coach. We'll be here at the compound for a while. Yep.
All right, good. All right. I would, too, if I lived in the compound. Jason Stark going to join us, talk a little Major League Baseball, what's going on with the Red Sox, who just cannot get a win. That and plenty more with Jason Stark coming up in 15 minutes. But right now, Mel, we talk about the biggest names that may be on the move playing with a different team next NBA season than they've played with this season. It is our...
The Hot List.
I've got to stop doing that. I've got to stop setting it up with it is our The Hot List. That doesn't make sense. It is our The Hot List. No. Let's try that again. It is...
The Hot List.
Okay, there we go. All right, so here it is.
Job.
Thank you, yes. Got to get that one right before you bail on us.
You gave yourself a mulligan in my final hour.
Yep, mulligans are just fine. If you saw my initial tee shot, you would accept it yourself. Biggest NBA stars likely to play elsewhere next season. Let's go 3 and 2 and 1.
All right.
Number 3, Mel.
David Lee. Now, he's not a superstar, but he averages 18-plus points a game and 9-plus rebounds a game. He's been mentioned in trade talk. I guess specifically if the Wolves, move Love. Again, we'll get to him in a minute, at least for my list. But even if that deal doesn't come about, they're probably going to actively try to move David Lee. He makes good money. They could be looking to go with a more versatile scorer at that position. So I'll go David Lee at number 3.
You will go David. I like David Lee. I didn't even really have him under consideration. That's an interesting one. My number 3 is Lance Stevenson, Indiana Pacers. A lot of teams would love to have him. A 2 that can shoot the ball from the outside, create his own shot. He comes with a little bit of off-court drama, talks a lot of smack, but he's fun. And he's fun to watch. He'll give a team a little toughness, I think. His name comes up here in Charlotte. Gerald Henderson's still around, but you want to upgrade at the 2, for instance. Get a guy that can shoot the ball, can create a shot, can get to the basket. I think he's a really good fit. He's an unrestricted free agent. He's going to have options. I think he's gone. I think he's out of Indiana after their run here in the postseason is over. How about number 2?
David Lee with the Golden State Warriors at 3. Number 2, Carmelo Anthony, the New York Knicks. He wants to win a title. I talk about it, matching him up. Stephen A. Smith brought it up earlier in our show about matching Carmelo up with LeBron, getting them on the same team. Going back to Cleveland, we'll see if that happens with LeBron. But Carmelo wants to win an NBA championship. Obviously, there's other possibilities out there are much better in terms of that opportunity that will be provided than the Knicks are. The Knicks are willing to give him max money. Then he would return, but you get the feeling that they're not going to give him that type of contract, then he could easily end up elsewhere. So at number 2, I'll go with Carmelo Anthony.
I agree with you. Number 2, second biggest name likely to play somewhere next year that's not where they played this year. I agree it's Carmelo. He wants to play for a championship. I get that. At the same time, is he part of a championship formula in New York in the eyes of Phil Jackson? And I think that's a bit of a question. Carmelo is going to be criticized until he gets a team to the NBA Finals for not being a championship type of player, for taking too many shots, for wanting to be the number 1 guy when maybe realistically he should be a number 2 guy. And I don't know that Phil Jackson's going to want to handle that, deal with that. Phil Jackson is just confident enough, arrogant enough to build this roster the way that he wants to build this roster. And I wouldn't be surprised if he urged Carmelo to go somewhere else. He can opt out of his deal. I would expect him to do that and see what's out there. And maybe New York doesn't offer what a lot of people think New York should offer. I think Melo's on the move. I'm with you. So number 2, Carmelo. But of all the big names, who is the biggest that you think plays somewhere else next season?
I'm going to go Kevin Love, Minnesota Timberwolves. Brought him up when I was talking about David Lee, because you think about David Lee, where could he end up? If the Timberwolves move Kevin Love, maybe there. We'll see. But Kevin Love, he can opt out of his deal next summer, but will probably do so. Whether he gets moved this summer or before the trading deadline next season, I don't know how it turns out, how it plays out, but it's pretty obvious that Kevin Love's days in Minnesota with the Timberwolves are numbered. There's going to be several teams we brought up during the show. Some people commented about out. Kevin Love, Celtics, Lakers, wherever it is, going back to the West Coast. Of course, he played at UCLA. But I think Kevin Love would be number 1 on my list.
I agree. We're on the same page here. Kevin Love for me, too. By the way, you want to get one in? Who's the big name that's going to be somewhere else next season? 888-SAY-ESPN. Get it in quick. 888-729-3776. Mel, I agree. It's Kevin Love. He's got 1 year left at best. That's it. He knows he's going. Everybody in Minnesota knows he's going. And everybody that watched this team, I thought this was a playoff team coming into the year with Rubio and Love. And if they could stay healthy, they weren't. And they're not. And now you've got to get something for them. Or else you're going to go through, you're going to win 41 games maybe next season and then lose him for nothing. You have to. You have no choice if you're Minnesota. He's gone. He's absolutely gone in my mind, and he should be. So Kevin Love there, biggest name to go somewhere else. Mel, I want to know who you had on your list. Pau Gasol, I think the Lakers are going to start over without him, unrestricted free agent. Kyle Lowry, I considered in Toronto. Boy, did he have a good year. Can they keep him unrestricted free agent? Lou Alding in Cleveland. Why would he stay in Cleveland? Unless he's so impressed with the number 1 pick and feels that LeBron James is an option there. I don't know that he stays. And then there's Paul Pierce, big name. What's he give? He's probably a bench guy somewhere for a championship contender, but he's an unrestricted free agent for Brooklyn.
Yeah, it's interesting when you really try to put together this list. I got David Lee in there because I like watching him. He's one of those grinders. He just finds a way to get a rebound, offensive rebound. He's always where he needs to be. He's always got his hands on the ball. He's always doing something positive to impact the game. And I wouldn't say he's a superstar if that's what this list was all about, but when you average over 18 points a game and over 9 rebounds a game, you're doing a lot right, and you're going to interest a lot of people out there. So I've always liked the way David Lee plays the game, and I think he's done a good job in Golden State, and he'll have a chance. This will be with his 3rd team now if he moves on, and I think he will.
How about Dan in South Dakota? Dan in South Dakota, who's a big name you expect to be somewhere else next basketball season?
Hey, guys. I appreciate you taking my call.
Sure.
I think the one that you left off the list is Rajon Rondo. I think there's a lot of stuff going on in Boston. There hasn't been a lot of commitment from either side moving forward. I think he's one name that could definitely be on the move.
Okay.
No, Rondo is, sure. Rondo is an option. He's always been out there. I mean, Boston's been floating him around for 3 years now. And so I think that that's certainly something to keep in mind there as a big star that could be somewhere else. All right, let's go to Corey in Michigan. Corey, you may have a home for Carmelo, and that's a home that Mel threw out a little bit ago. Where do you see him?
I'd like, as a Bulls fan, to see him out in Chicago, but I just wanted to get your guys' take on it. Love the show, and I'll listen to what you got to say.
Mel, you've talked about this.
Yeah, and everybody else says, well, you're wrong, Kuiper, because he doesn't fit what they do out there and all this. I don't know. I know he can score, and I know that's what they need. So I think with the complement of players they have, whether it's the right fit or not, that's not for me to decide. But I brought the Bulls up, and we'll see. He wants a chance to win a championship. That's what Carmelo's all about right now, is winning an NBA title, winning an NBA championship. You're not going to do it with the Knicks for a long time. I say a long time, at least, 5 years? What would you say, Dari? When are the Knicks going to be a championship-caliber team again? I mean, they're going to have a lot of money, but it won't be this year. It'll be next year. So it just depends who they can convince to come there. Yeah, the mix of players, exactly. And that's a big mystery right now. So you go with a team that's not a mystery, a team that's a given. And the Bulls are a given to be a team that he could elevate to and maybe a championship level. So I would say wherever you find a team that just needs a missing link, a missing ingredient, which is what a big-time scorer like Carmelo Anthony would provide.
By the way, if you're wondering about Rajon Rondo's contract situation, he's got 1 year left, $13 million with the Celtics. That's runs through, obviously, through 2014-2015 season. Dari and Mel, ESPN Radio, ESPNradio.com. Always great to have you with us. And coming up, we will oh, by the way, that is our hot list, which is brought to you by Charbroil True Infrared Grills. Visit charbroil.com/trueinfrared to learn more. Coming up, Jason Stark, always an entertaining listen, full of incredibly valuable, unthought-of-before information about Major League Baseball. He'll give that to us. And what is wrong with Boston? They've lost 8 straight games. We'll get into that and more with Jason Stark. It's ESPN Radio. Hey. ESPNradio.com. One of the great baseball songs, one of the great songs of all time. Baseball song. John Fogerty action. All right, let's talk baseball. We must be talking baseball here. Why not? We've only got 45 minutes left of Mel before he disappears for a significant vacation. Kuiper's callers, by the way. You get one more crack at Mel before he leaves town. Tell him what you think of him leaving the show for a few weeks. All right? Yeah, your opportunity to do that comes in 15 minutes, so we'll get into that. But right now, let's bring in one of the great thought-provoking writers and commentators when it comes to Major League Baseball. That's our very own Jason Stark, who joins us via the Subway Fresh Take Hotline. Jason, always great to have you with us, and we don't do it enough, but we're going to start picking it up here as we get into the summer, the dog days.
That'd be great, Dari.
Yeah, we're going to. Red Sox have lost 8 in a row. Nobody's feeling sorry for them, but what ultimately is the reason as you see it?
Well, there's not just one reason. It's hard to get the Lightning to hit that bottle exactly the same way 2 years in a row, and I think that's part of it. But when you start looking at some of the pieces they lost and how they're trying to replace them, that's not going so well. You know, that I guess we underestimated the Jacoby Ellsbury departure last winter, and you're seeing it now. Last year they led the league in on-base percentage out of the leadoff hole, and this year they're 22nd. They're right at the top in OPS out of the leadoff hole, and this year they're 27th. And Dustin Pedroia has struggled, so they're getting almost no base runners at the top of their order. And then even in the middle, the only player on their team who's slugging over 420 is Big Papi. And so you're seeing a losing streak now where they've scored 16 runs in 8 games. That kind of tells the tale.
7 games below 500, tied for the cellar in the AL East. It's amazing. But I brought this up. He was almost my hero of the week. And then I said, well, I'll go the zero of the week and say it's his supporting cast or lack of, Jason. And I want to get your take on it. Have we ever had a pitcher? I'm talking about Jeff Samardzija getting no support. So the zero of the week, the lack of the supporting cast for Jeff Samardzija. 1.46 ERA, started 10 games. He's 0-4 with a 1.46 ERA, lowest in the entire league. Could he make the All-Star team, Jason, and not have a win?
I asked the other day in a column whether he could win the Cy Young if he doesn't have a win. I think we're in really historic territory here, Mel, so almost anything's possible. It's just incomprehensible to have a guy with an ERA under 1.5, 10 starts into the season without a win. I'll tell you something even more incomprehensible. His team is 1-9 when he starts. Now, if that's not a lawsuit waiting to happen, I don't know what is.
Well, Jason,
I would love the grounds for that lawsuit.
But could he really make the All-Star team with a record that is going to be pretty bad?
If he's leading the league in ERA, if his ERA is under 1.5, I like his chances.
Jason, has that ever happened before?
No. A starting pitcher? We never had anything like this. To have a pitcher with an ERA this low after 10 starts who has 0 wins is completely unprecedented. We don't even have close to a precedent. I was looking the other day. This actually goes back into last year. He hasn't won a game, Mel, since August 24th. Rick Porcello has a higher ERA than he has since then and has 11 wins. So you know how people talk about how the win is overrated? I think Jeff Samardzija is the poster boy for that.
Holy smokes. That's unbelievable. And, of course, he can make the All-Star team. Mel, we start voting for All-Stars in January. The season doesn't start till April.
Hey, Chase, the reason I brought it up, this guy would have been a second-round pick had he not played baseball, and he'd gone into the NFL as a wide receiver coming out of Notre Dame with Brady Quinn being the quarterback, but he opted to go into baseball. I hope he starts getting some support and can win some games because he's developed into a heck of a pitcher.
Yeah, I think slot receiver is starting to look like a pretty good career choice right now.
Yeah, there's no question about that. My goodness. Prince Fielder, done for the year. Texas, he wasn't producing for Texas. Texas is, I think, Jason, one of the big disappointments. Jason Stark joining us here. When you look around baseball, give me the team or player that you deem as the biggest disappointment thus far.
Well, at least I have to say the Rangers have a good excuse, don't you? 14 players on the disabled list.
There's no doubt.
They have more players on the disabled list than on the roster, so I'm going to give them a pass. And when I wrote this the other day, the team that I picked as the biggest disappointment was the Rays. I looked at our ESPN preseason predictions. Out of 44 of us predicting, 42 of us thought the Rays were going to make the playoffs, and a bunch of us, including myself, thought they were going to win the World Series. And I mean, they've been poking around with. I think at this point it's the fourth worst record in baseball. They almost dropped to 10 games under 500 the other day, though they pulled out that miracle on extra innings. And but they've got excuses too. When you're a pitching and defense team, and you lose 3/5 of your starting rotation, it's hard to have the depth to cover that. Now, Alex Cobb is back. They haven't lost since he came back, so stay tuned.
Tied with Boston for the fourth worst record. You're right. 7 games out of 500.
Unbelievable. And that's, I guess, the general question, Jay. So I was looking over this, and Dari and I were talking about Major League Baseball and the state of Major League Baseball. And I know Pete Rozelle and all the former commissioners of the NFL always said parity. 20 to 21 of the 30 teams in Major League Baseball right now are either below 500, at 500, or hovering around 500. What do we take from all that, Jason?
Well, I'm the guy, Mel, who keeps writing every year about Major League Baseball's competitive imbalance has now surpassed football's. And, nobody in the NFL wants to hear this, but the facts bear it out. And one of the reasons is, if you look at payroll this year, we've got half the teams in baseball now with $100 million payrolls. We've only got 7 teams that have payrolls below $90 million. And so some of the financial advantages that teams like the Yankees used to have compared to everybody else are fading. Now, obviously, the Yankees and Dodgers still have more money than anybody else, but revenues are big enough now that teams can keep their players if those players want to be kept, and we're seeing the results of that.
Jason Stark joining us, Subway Fresh Take Hotline. Totally random question here, Jason, but why not? You're the perfect guy for this because you see the game so differently, I think, sometimes, and you make us think about things. That said, a baseball guy such as yourself, what is the best baseball movie of all time, Jason?
The best baseball movie of all time. My favorite is Bull Durham. I probably should say
there we go.
Since I'm in it. But my very favorite is Bull Durham. I just thought somebody like me who, when I'm watching a baseball movie, I want it to seem real. I want it to look real. I want the dialogue to seem real. Mm-hmm. And Bull Durham did that as well as any movie. But I think $1 Million Arm is very underrated. If you haven't seen it and you kind of see what my face looks like 80 feet high, this is your chance.
$1 million, really? Okay, all right. Oh, you can push it because that's great. But see, that was not on my list to go see, but now it is.
It's been out for 6 days, so.
Yeah. No, it wasn't on my list to go see. I was not dying to go see it, but now I'll go see it. All right, Jason.
You should. I recommend it highly. I've only seen it 3 times now, and every audience I was a part of loved it.
There it is. All right, Jason, good stuff, man. We appreciate it.
Jason.
You know what I want next time, although he's probably got it patented with Mike and Mike, is the trivia. I love the trivia. I love it when he's on and he throws out a trivia question and then answers it later. Good stuff. Straight ahead, call Kuiper's Callers. Last one of the year, 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776, and tell him what you think of his impending vacation. ESPN Radio. I don't know how many times we've done this over the last few months. I'm going to guess 20 to 25. But this, folks, is the last Kuiper's Callers. This is it for the year. So if you want in, get in now. Let's go. Tony in Columbus, you're on ESPN Radio.
Hey, Mel, thanks for taking the call. Real quick, the Cleveland Cavaliers with #1 draft choice and the Cleveland Browns with Johnny Football. Who makes the playoffs first, the Cavs or the Browns? You tell me.
Cavs or the Browns? I will say that the Cavaliers do. How's that? That's just guessing as to what changes they're going to make. Could LeBron be back? That's going to happen with number 1 pick. I love Jabari Parker. Dari does as well. Irving's a star. So, yeah, I would say right now, because of the division with Pittsburgh, I think getting better because of this draft. Baltimore's going to be in the thick of it. You know the Bengals are going to be right there. They had a productive draft. They were a quality team last year. So because of the division, I think it'll take the Browns a couple years. Maybe the Cavaliers get there first.
Let's go to Portland, Oregon, and Richard. Good morning, Richard.
Hi, Dari and Mel. My question is, when the Redskins improve to 8-8, middle of the pack next year, what safeties are they going to be looking at in the middle of the first round?
Well, if you're looking at safeties for next year, and this is obviously contingent upon which guys leave early, and that's pretty much the main group. But I would say Landon Collins from Alabama would be the main guy. And he's underclassman. He's have a big year, and he's capable of having a huge season and maybe moving up ahead of that. Of the seniors, Duron Smith would be the top guy from Fresno State, and Drummond from Michigan State. But I would say Landon Collins from Alabama with Darren Smith from Fresno State second.
All right, Kuiper's Callers cruising along here. Craig in D.C. You're on ESPN Radio, Craig.
Hey, how you guys doing? First of all, Mel, I want to wish you a happy vacation, but I just want to remind you, please pack lots of tasty cakes. I heard you talk about this a few weeks ago.
Oh, yeah.
Wherever you go, if they don't have them, make sure you have a lot of them.
A couple boxes. You're right. Tasty cakes are the best, man.
Okay. A question about LeBron James. If the Miami Heat win the championship, do you think he will opt in and go for a 4-peat, or do you think, and if they lose, do you think he's out of there?
I think this, and I've said this pretty much all along, if the Heat win, I think he definitely remains in Miami. If they lose, I think all bets are off. I think, again, and Stephen A. talked about the makeup of the team. He's kind of carrying more of the workload now. And I think if they win, he'll be back. If they don't, I think he moves on.
I love that the final Kuiper's Callers is really all over the board, and I would encourage more of that. You have any other kind of question for Mel before he takes his long vacation? Ask it. Let's go to David in Michigan. You're on ESPN Radio.
Hey, I was just wondering, judging by the division that the Lions play in with all the receivers that are in that division, if they made the right choice by taking Ebron, I was kind of hoping they would have strictly went straight defense with that draft, and just kind of wonder what you would think, if that was a good pick or if they kind of reached.
Well, the secondary wasn't addressed until the fourth round with Lawson from Utah State, who's not a bad player, and he will help them. But I think what they're trying to do is get the pass rush and get the front seven built up, adding Van Noy to an already strong group. Remember, Ansa's from BYU, Van Noy, again, with his old teammate, and get Ebron to be, like I talked about, Odell Beckham is who I projected there. They went with a receiving entity who's a glorified wide receiver, which is what Ebron is. So I think that if they can get anything out of Webster and decide where they're going to play him, but I think Van Noy will be a big upgrade at the outside linebacker spot, and the front seven will maybe mask some of the problems they have in the deep patrol.
Your pre-vacation questions for Mel, 888-SAY-ESPN. Carl in Brooklyn, you're on ESPN Radio.
You know, Mel, this is what I'm doing on Monday. Big cookout. I got to know. I need the recipe for the perfect crab cake.
Oh, boy. Perfect crab cake has Old Bay, which is here in the Baltimore, Maryland area. Old Bay seasoning is the key ingredient. And obviously, you mix in some breadcrumbs, an egg, and some mustard. But Old Bay seasoning will make it a Maryland crab cake.
There it is. There's the secret. All right, Garrett in Washington. Welcome to ESPN Radio pre-vacation question for Mel. What do you got, Garrett?
Hey, Mel, I always wondered, how do you not go to the bathroom during the NFL draft?
I don't drink any water. And by the way, mayonnaise is also a key ingredient in that crab cake as well. So mayonnaise as well as a little bit of mustard. But in terms of you can't have bottled water after bottled water diet. You can't do that. You can't be drinking a lot of water. I don't drink any. The cat never left the top, and then Todd McShay and Chris Berman and John Gruden and Ray Lewis and Trent Dilfer and Trey Wingo can attest to that. Never once took a sip of water in the 3 days of the draft.
That's amazing. Like, first, I'm doing the ACC championship game tomorrow in Greensboro, and baseball. I don't drink anything. That game's at 1. I won't have a sip of anything after about 11.
Yep.
How do you do it all day? I mean, your throat gets dry. You're talking a lot. I don't know how you do it. All right, well, Shane and go ahead, Mo.
They drink a lot before the draft this way.
I guess.
But go ahead. The next caller, Dart.
All right, Shane in Illinois. Good morning, Shane.
Good morning. I'm a Cleveland Browns fan. The healthy Brian Hoyer, the addition of Miles Austin and Earl Bennett,
and hopefully, fingers crossed, Josh Gordon doesn't get suspended. What are your chances, Mel, that the Browns are improved? How much improved over last year?
Well, it's a lot of ifs. I mean, Hoyer staying healthy, Hoyer reverting back to the form he had prior to the injury, whether Gordon will be there for a full season, what happens there, how quickly Gilbert develops at corner. He's going to be a return man as well. Batonio getting on that offensive line, getting cohesion there. All these things, new entities, Weston now, Tate in the backfield. All these question marks. If they come together, they can challenge. They have this league. You can go from the bottom to close to the top, or right into the playoff mix. But a lot of major ifs are still out there, and I don't know if they all come through with resounding results and make you a playoff team. As I said, I think the Cavaliers may end up in the playoffs before the Browns, and the division's very tough as well.
More random questions. Kuiper's callers, the last one. Dari Mel, ESPN Radio. We go to Pennsylvania and John. Hey, John.
Hey, Mel, how are you doing? Happy vacation.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it, man.
Mel, this is the most important question you're going to be asked today and perhaps for the rest of your life.
Uh-oh.
Do you believe in Bigfoot?
Oh, ooh, I watch that show on there with the whole monsters, the mountain monsters, and they never find anything. They put these elaborate traps up and trying to find this lizard, whatever, and this crazy thing, and they have these pictures, but they never find anything. So I guess I believe there's something out there, the men from Mars and all that type of thing. I guess I believe in that too. But yeah, I believe there's something out there. But so far, the Appalachian Mountains, where all these things supposedly are, somewhere in the Appalachian Mountains, they haven't found anything to justify all the hype.
All right, continuing on with other important topics like that. Mark in South Carolina, you're on ESPN Radio. I love it.
Hey, Mel, question. Can the South Carolina Gamecocks finally win the SEC in college football this year?
Lost an awful lot. I mean, you're talking about a lot of talent coming off that team, but a lot of talent return. So can they do it? I'd say it's going to be very difficult. I look at a guy like Mike Davis. If he can carry it, Mike Davis is one of the best running backs in all of college football. Thompson had his moments at quarterback, but you lost an awful lot. You got an offensive line, though, and that's the one thing. With Robinson, with Shell, the offensive line and Mike Davis give them a chance to have a successful season and a very good season. Can they do it all, win it all? There's a lot of question marks with all those teams in terms of the offensive lines. Auburn's got, even though they lose Robinson's got a good line returning. Alabama's questionable. LSU took some hits. But I think this offensive line at South Carolina, in addition to have a great running back like Davis, will help them out immensely.
Let's go John in Texas. Hey, John.
Hey, Mel, pound for pound, who works out harder, a 20-year-old player at a combine or a 64-year-old Bruce Springsteen at a concert?
Ooh.
Oh, boy. I'll tell you, those concerts are demanding. And, he puts on a heck of a show. Darius Rucker put on a heck of a show when Kim and I went last week. And Lauren Kuiper's going to see Dari Noka's favorite, Bruno Mars, in mid-July. So there you go.
I don't mind Bruno. I'll say that. I don't mind Bruno.
Hey, a Florida-Georgia line is going to be somewhere in this area as well, and Lauren's a big fan. Cruise, their song.
That's the only song I've ever heard from them. Do they have any other ones?
They have others, but Cruise is what has made them famous.
Yeah. No, Cruise made them very famous. All right, Brian in Kansas. Let's go another one. You're on ESPN Radio. Brian?
Yes, sir.
You're on ESPN Radio. What's your question for Mel?
All right, Mel, how many more years of sub-500 or 500 records and missing the playoffs is it going to take Jerry Jones to decide he needs to hire a general manager instead of trying to do it all himself?
I think it's never going to happen. I think Jerry's going to be the GM. Jerry said he's done the best job he's ever done the last few years, which you can find fault with, obviously, and we can debate the kind of job he's done. But he's the owner, he's the general manager, and nothing's changing. That's all I can say. I don't see that. I have asked that question, and everybody tells me he's going to be the GM, and he feels like he's doing a heck of a job. And, hey, we'll see. This draft wasn't bad. You got two players at the top, Martin and Lawrence, who are definitely going to help the offensive line and defensive lines respectfully.
I believe that is the best Kuiper's callers we've ever had. We went from football to your crab cake recipe to your draft day bladder control to do you believe in Bigfoot. We went everywhere. On this Kuiper's callers. Dari Mel, ESPN Radio, presented by Progressive Insurance, comparing rates to help you save. Now, that's Progressive. Call or click today and find out how much Progressive could save you. Folks, it is time, in a moment, for Mel's final pre-vacation segment. What is it he wants all of us to know? And what do we think will ultimately happen in the two conference finals in the NBA, which may be less interesting than Mel's summer vacation plans? Dari and Mel, ESPN Radio.
Hi, it's
Mel is 8.5 minutes from a vacation. How many weeks is the vacation, Mel?
Well, add it up. August 16th is when I return. Do the math.
I don't want to. I was hoping you'd do the math.
We'll be down in Annapolis a lot. We're going to go to Ocean City for a week. Maybe to Florida for a little bit. We're debating that, whether we want to take the drive down to Florida or not. But we'll be having a good time over the next 25 weeks.
If you drive to Florida, you better stop in Charlotte, okay, because you can do that.
Well, we said we were going to try to get down to Lake Norman.
There you go.
Right?
Come visit the Noka family. So do that for us. That would be great. Okay, then before you leave, see, last week we made our Eastern and Western Conference predictions.
Uh-oh.
And we both had Miami in 6.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I had the Thunder in 7, and I regret that greatly. You had the Spurs in 7. Would you like to, and you can, and nobody's going to hold it against you because you're not going to be here anyway, would you like to adjust those? Do you have any change of heart either way here? I doubt with the Spurs unless you want to limit the number of games there.
No, because with Ibaka now possibly, not possibly, look like he is going to return. In what form, we'll see. Maybe that gives him a little bit of a boost. The way the Spurs are playing, I didn't anticipate it being as dominant as it has been. So that bodes very poorly for your Thunder. So maybe it doesn't go 7. Maybe it goes 4 to 5, maximum of 6. So maybe you get off the 7 number. For Miami, I'll still say Miami in 6. But I think that's going to be a very competitive series. It could go 7. Maybe I would move back from 6 to 7. Based on what I've seen so far. Indiana should be up 2-0. They had a chance to really close out Game 2 and couldn't do it in the final 5 minutes of that game. So I just hope that your Thunder can make it interesting, but right now it doesn't look good. Like I said, I gave them a 0% chance of winning the series. You gave them, a 2% chance? Stephen A. said maybe a 1% chance. It's going to be very tough. I just hope the games, which we haven't had yet, Dari, are we going to have a competitive game?
Well, I mean, Game 1 in San Antonio, they came back from 15 down and took the lead.
Right.
Game 2, first, half was somewhat. I mean, quarter and a half. I mean, look.
From start to finish. We're going to have a game we'll get down to the final 2 minutes. Is it going to be in jeopardy?
Yes. No, there will be late drama in the OKC. There will be some late drama.
You hope.
I hope. I wouldn't bet a dime on it, but and again, it's part to me, Mel. It's as much because of how well the Spurs are playing than anything else. I mean,
I'm not buying that, Dari. I'm not buying
how their efficiency on offense
I don't care about
is incredible.
It wouldn't have been that way with Ibaka.
How does that not matter?
You completely underestimated Serge Ibaka and his importance
I did.
To that team. So don't tell me that it's all about San Antonio now. If Ibaka's healthy and playing, San Antonio's not looking like this juggernaut. Okay, they're not hitting on all cylinders like they are right now with Ibaka in there. Well, Ibaka has allowed all these other things to happen. His absence has allowed all those other things to happen, or at least a lot of those other things to happen. So I think Ibaka, that was devastating. And that's what was the reason I switched from saying Oklahoma City would win it all to saying San Antonio was going to beat them, is because of Ibaka's injury. Now that he's back, I don't know, is he 30%, 50%? What form does he return to? Who the heck knows?
No, we don't. We don't know. I mean, where he will make an impact whenever he's back, and we hope it's tomorrow. At least Thunder fans hope it's tomorrow. Tony Parker will not drive as carelessly, or I should say carefreely, into the lane, which he has done at a remarkable pace. So Tony Parker will be a little more challenged in there. And also, it's the Parker and Ginobili drives and kickouts to wide open shooters. Danny Green, wide open time after time. He's 11 of 15 from 3 in the series. He's been absolutely deadly. But, yes, Russell Westbrook can't shoot 35% anymore. Kevin Durant can't struggle from the floor the way he did in Game 2. Those two have to be good. Serge, when he's playing, will have to give them double figures. You have to get something from Caron Butler. You have to look. If Thabo Sefolosha is going to give you nothing, then he needs to not either not be on the floor, which is difficult with the Spurs guards and how good of offensive players they are because he's a good defender, or make darn sure he doesn't take another shot. He's killing them at times. Nick Collison hasn't given them much. I'm a Nick Collison fan, and it's been disappointing. I don't know where you go. Reggie Jackson, nothing. Got to get some offense from him. I mean, there's just too many things that have to happen for them.
And let's face facts, Dory. Based on what we see now, the form these teams are in, I think all NBA fans, for the most part, obviously down in Oklahoma City, and you, Dory, would think otherwise, but you really want to see San Antonio and Miami. You want to see Miami have a shot at another chance. I'm saying NBA fans that are impartial. Let me explain. You have Miami trying to win yet another title with the big three, okay? And you have San Antonio, who everybody would say right now is playing the best basketball of anybody in the NBA, has arguably the best coach in the NBA, has great players, and they are all coming together. Wouldn't you want to see this Spurs team play the Heat for all the marbles? I would.
No. I wouldn't.
No. And who would you want to see?
Let me. And one thing you said, you can kill the word arguably from best coach in the NBA. Greg Popovich is the best coach in the NBA. Yeah. Okay.
I said, where's your problem?
No. Look, because I think in an NBA Finals, you imagine you get LeBron and Durant on the same floor. You get Wade and Westbrook on the same floor. Now, if you don't have Serge, that obviously kills it for Oklahoma City. But you want those stars on the floor. Parker is a star. I realize Ginobili and Duncan, whatever. Star power in the NBA Finals, that's what I want. That's what, and I'm trying to be unbiased in this. I would think that's what the majority of NBA fans want. That
with
star power.
With Ibaka healthy, I think they might have beat the Spurs. But Ibaka's not. So I don't want a team that's banged up with a key player not healthy going in to play for the championship. So I don't think they're going to beat the Spurs anyway. But I think knowing what we know right now, you would want the Spurs and the Heat. That's what I'm saying, Doug. Knowing what we know right now, prior to Ibaka's injury, I'd have said Thunder, Heat, great.
Yes.
But with Ibaka out, I don't want to see Oklahoma City against Heat. I want to see San Antonio. Now, San Antonio's not good enough to close down. If Ibaka becomes Superman, all bets are off then. Then we like to see it. But is Ibaka coming off this injury that was supposed to keep him out every postseason game the remainder of the way? Is he all of a sudden going to be as good as he was? What's the chances of that happening?
Well, we don't know. It's not good. It's certainly not good. Dari and Mel brought to you by Performance Bicycles Markdown Madness. Now through Memorial Day at stores nationwide and online at performancebike.com. Don't forget, after splitting the first two games in Indiana, the series in the East shifts back to Miami. Pacers Heat, Game 3. Coverage begins on ESPN Radio tonight, 7:30 Eastern. You can also watch it on ESPN. This is a big Game 3, Mel. Who wins Game 3?
I'm going to say Miami finds a way to win games. And I don't know, one of these two. They got to win one of them. I'll just say one of the two. Indiana could win the Game 3, but Miami will get what they need to do to hold serve. So Miami will find a way to hold serve. I'm not sure which game they win, but they'll win one of them.
All right, there you go. 7:30 ESPN Radio tonight. Mel, have a great vacation, and if you come through North Carolina, you had better call me and stop in Charlotte.
Lake Norman, here we come.
There it is. That's Mel. Dari Mel, ESPN Radio. Thank you for listening. Don LaGreca Show coming right up.